Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James Bond.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
And welcome back to the SuperCaZt, everybody. It is part 3 of our Bond rankings. If you haven't seen our first 2 parts and want to know what we said about those films, well, click on here, catch up with us, because we're about to do the top 5, man. We're about to do the best of the best, at least according to our feeble minds.
Yeah, I mean, it's all according to us, as we said from the get-go. It's all subjective.
Yep.
Even though I tried to apply some objectivity to it by creating my own ranking system and all this stuff, it's mainly comes down to is like, what do I think?
Yeah.
Or what do you think? And I think so far, pretty standard if you know me.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say there's probably 1 or 2 here that you probably were surprised by.
I
had it
was.
ranked.
And I think the biggest one for me, because I was curious where you were going to put this, was Skyfall. I think of the modern films, this is probably the most popular one to date, as far as critical review, commercial review. Everybody loves Skyfall. It's maybe not even that big of a Bond fan. I'm not too far behind you as far as like you put it in the kind of the middle of the pack, and I that's the one thing, because I was really we talked about before we got on the air, is I was really curious to see, especially where you would put this film, because yes, it's a great film, and I would even go as far as to say it's a great Bond film. Now, when we say that, do you feel like that's fair? I mean, do you feel like that's a fair thing to say? It's a great film. It's a great Bond film. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, I think we can just because we're fans. Yep. That's part of the deal.
That's
so,
it.
I'm recognized under the fandom. I've done it for years.
Yep.
I've been in this series.
Yep.
A movie critic and a fan are going to look at things differently. And I try to do both on the same time when I'm evaluating these films. I'm thinking it from a critical standpoint, but also personal enjoyment.
Yep.
How much do I enjoy this as a Bond fan? What am I looking for in a Bond film? And that's where Skyfall kind of doesn't do it for me. Is, as a Bond film, it is not a very great Bond film. I mean, yes, it's twisting up the formula. Yes, it's going away from the formula, but that's good in doses. I don't want that for every single Craig film that I watch. I want to have that comfort. I want to have that Bond experience a little bit. And I see what they were doing. It's just not for me. And I respect this film. Like I said, when we were talking about it, it really resurrected the series again after Quantum of Solace, and did something that I thought was really awesome.
Yeah.
And still a great film to watch. As I said, Javier Bardem as Silva, probably one of the best villains in this series. He's great. Stand out from that. But for me, where I stand with that film, I can't put it in the top 10 just because there's these other 10 I just love so much more. And these others, that's all I can say about Skyfall right now.
I'll tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of another film that a lot of fans like and a lot of critics like, and that's The Dark Knight. You go back to that.
Yeah.
You go back to that film. Is it a good film? Sure. Is it a good Batman film? And I think that's where is it a good Batman film? Obviously it's up to personal choice, but I think that's what's hard about going back to James Bond is about this series is we're talking about 25 films, and that's not a lot of films, but you're talking about 60 plus years now of films, and you got different actors, you got different directors, writers. I mean, everybody's kind of dipping their toe in this Bond pool here, and so for me, it's this list is not as easy as you would think. Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I mean, I spent months on this. I was
You did.
it out. I watched movies again. I I think it's tough. Yes, like you said, compare it across decades.
Decades.
Film techniques changed a lot. But that's why it's a lot of fun doing this. Is because
it is.
everybody's going to have a different look at it. There's going to be a few here in my top 10, as I discussed, that people are going to be like, "What? Why would you have Moonraker as your number 7 favorite?" Bond film?
That one surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, and same thing.
But that's okay.
It's down to our taste.
Right.
So that's all I gotta say about that. I
and
think it's
guys,
just for fun.
At the end of the day, these are movies we're talking about here. This is sources of fun and entertainment. And if you don't like these films and you prefer something else, that is okay. I think sometimes we guilt people. It's like, oh, you don't like the Marvel films? You're not, you're not a comic book fan. That's bullcrap, you know what I mean? We're not even get into Marvel versus DC today. That's something I'm not even halfway.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with what we're talking about because we're at the top 5.
Top 5 of the Bond films. All right, man. Let's go with your number 5. Let's hear it.
Okay, number 5. And this is one thing that we talked about last time. Sometimes a film experience can make you dramatically rethink the way you look at a movie. At one point, I had this one in my number 5 way down there. Probably like 20 or so.
Yeah.
I thought it was the worst Connery film.
Yeah.
And I thought it was one of the worst Bond films. It's You Only Live Twice.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the way I thought.
Yeah.
But I changed my tune on it. I think this is one of the best made Bond films as far as direction goes, editing, cinematography. Oh my gosh, it's insane. You definitely see the 2001 Space Odyssey influence in here.
You do.
You see the whole sort of space race vibe. I really like it. But it's just a great Bond adventure. We got a great villain. We got a volcano layer. It's just awesome. It's like your textbook Bond. I'll get into what I don't like about it later and why it couldn't be number 1 for me. But it can't be there.
Yeah.
But it could be in the conversation if it had this one aspect working for it better. But to me, this one jumped so much for me. It's got a lot working for it and a little bit working against it.
Yeah, this is a film I don't much care for. I had this one way lower in my list. But I understand it. And that's the great thing about these films is, and we're a lot alike. We've had similar ratings, I think, throughout. But I think even just starting right here, I'm just not a fan of this film that much. I think maybe one of those films I watch tomorrow and be like, oh yeah, I get what Steve's saying. This is great. This is fantastic. Because my number 5 is probably one of those films that a lot of people are going to be like, but this film, I don't know. Like, I think this is probably one of the least of the series that I've seen. You Only Live Twice. And I know it's probably one of the more well-known ones as far as the title goes, but it's probably one of the least that I've seen, especially of the Connery versions. Now, you mentioned something you didn't like about this film. Want to talk about that now, the negative?
Yeah, definitely. And I can see where you're coming from. I went years and years before I watched this one again because I didn't like it. I remember watching it as a kid. I checked it out for the video store, and I was like, I liked the first part of it, but then toward the end, I'm like, oh, this is a snore fest. I don't like this anymore.
Yeah.
And the first thing I want to talk about that bothers me about the film, and this is one of the worst writing choices they've ever done, is they make Sean Connery Japanese for a scene.
They do. Oh, gosh, yeah.
And it's so bad. Yeah. It's like, who would fall for this disguise? This guy speaking Japanese with a Scottish accent. It's a very bad.
It's
in the end, it proves
it
proves no purpose.
No.
And it's borderline racist. It does not sit well. It does not age well.
Nope.
And I thought this back in 1995 whenever I watched this. So yeah, that part really didn't like that.
Yeah.
But what happened for me with this film is, even after watching it on DVD in like 2000 or something, I saw this in Blu-ray in high def, and that's what won me over.
Okay.
Is the look of this film. It is the best photographed Bond film, probably.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I mean, we'll talk about it more later, but the director of this film is just he's my favorite Bond director. Another thing that works against it, you've already got into it a little bit, is Connery is pretty bad in this film. And I'm not going to defend him so much right now. If we ever do a podcast on this one, I'll talk about sort of what's going into his performance, because he was just burnt out. He'd been making movies every year for 5 or 6 years.
You can tell.
And yeah, he's just burnt out. And I think everything else about this film is just top notch. That's why I have it top 5. It's amazing direction, amazing cinematography. The theme song.
Ooh.
You got to go put on this theme song, dude.
No, I'm with you on the theme song.
I mean, Nancy Sinatra. It's just great. I love the whole presentation of this film. Yes, Sean Connery sucks in it. Yes, it has some weird writing, but at the same time, it's the biggest finale to a Bond film at this point in the series. It's a volcano layer with ninjas coming down off of ropes and fighting these guys with machine guns and stuff. It's just madness. It's the first time we see Blofeld.
Yep.
And it's Donald Pleasant's playing Blofeld too. Probably the best Blofeld. So it's just got a lot working for it. That I kind of overlooked those two sort of not the best aspects of it.
I'm with you on the theme song, man. Theme song is one of my favorite. It's got a very unique sound to it. You mentioned Nancy Sinatra, one of the best vocalists in the Bond series. So it probably keeps me from really hating on this film too much. But I wouldn't say top 5, but that's cool with you.
Yeah, I mean it's all up to opinion. All right, number 4. So we knew we'd come to this one sooner or later because we haven't talked about it yet. You just said you ranked it number 5.
Yep.
Number 4, I have On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This one is very special. We did a podcast on it back when we were just recording, not video or anything. And we talked about it. We'll have to come back to it again later just because I'm sure we would evaluate the film differently even now. As we were just talking about with You Will and Live Twice, this film is just beautifully made as far as all the components from filmmaking that create it. It's actually only one of those that's actually really long Bond film, but it actually deserves that run time.
It does.
I could just gush about this film. Number 4, On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Same here, man. I mean, George Lazenby, I think, is very underrated. I think a lot of people kind of forget him and kind of put him. He's in this film, and I was trying to look it up. I think it's called Winter Break that he did back in the early 2000s, and he is still just very charming. He's got the silver hair at the time, but this guy, I mean, I think the thing that ruined his Bond career was he came to On Her Majesty's Secret Service with like long hair and a beard. And the Bond people were like, no, you can't do that. You got to look like James Bond. I think that's bullcrap. I think that's utter bullcrap on the studio's part. It's like, let the guy be the guy. He is not James Bond. He plays him in a movie. So I think that's kind of stupid to not bring him back. You want to defend that?
Well, it's a complicated thing.
Okay.
And I'm looking at it from a bunch of different ways. So from the public standpoint, I think we have to think about how people felt when Connery basically stepped away from the role.
You got a point there.
I mean, he was Bond. I mean, if you look at some of those ads for, let's say, Thunderbar or Goldfinger or something, it just says, Sean Connery is James Bond. I mean, he was that character. And at that point, just changing to a new person, and I thought, let's just continue on. I'm sure it kind of made audiences kind of react to that film a little bit differently. So that's from their standpoint, from the critic standpoint. Even though I think this one is a well-made film, and I'm sure critics liked it. Maybe not his performance. That's the thing that kind of brings it down for me. Actually, is
really? Wow. Okay.
yeah, he's.
All right.
I don't know. He's like one of those pitchers that have a few really good pitches, and they do it a few times throughout the game. But for the other part, it's not the best. He just has to survive those innings, and that's kind of what we get with Lazenby. I think because he's in it.
What do you feel like is his downfall? What do you feel like he doesn't do well?
He's just inexperienced. He doesn't have charisma at times. He has to. He doesn't stand in the way that, let's say, Sean Connery would or Roger Moore, some of the better actors that play the role.
True.
And it could be because his leading lady, Diana Rigg, is just the best actress of the whole series.
Right.
Maybe she's making him look bad. I don't know. Even though there's two scenes I like him in, she's in. The scene in the barn, that's good acting. When he falls in love with her and he asks her to marry her. Also, at the end, when he's having to cradle his dead wife in his hands. That's
spoiler alert.
Really good acting.
To me, that gives him the role there, because we have not seen James Bond play vulnerable up until this point. I mean, this is basically Superman. This is basically a superhero that couldn't save his, brand new wife. And, we're both married. We can both put ourselves in that position and be like, oh my gosh, that'd be terrible. I think it's one of his best parts. I think the way he shows vulnerability, he makes Bond a lot more human than, say, Sean Connery. Now, Sean Connery, he was framed to be this, superhero kind of guy. So they were never going to make him, at least, unless I guess he did this film. But do you feel like Sean Connery could have pulled, say that off, because they put him so high on a pedestal for all these other films, and then you have this really humanistic scene, and vulnerability and all that. Do you really feel like Connery could have done that?
I think he could have. I give him enough credit as actor. If he would have done like he did, phoned it in for You Only Live Twice, then he would have had some troubles. It would not have been a believable scene. But I think, Lazenby brings it on that scene. To me, that's the thing about this film is the filmmaking, the stuff they do with the story, the fact that they do make Bond vulnerable and it works. It adds more tension to that final scene. As Tracy held captive, basically. It's really well made, and like I said, I knock it for Lazenby. He's dubbed for I think 15% or 20% of the film. It's somebody else's voice playing James Bond. That's a little off-putting. But he's really good at the fights, and I love how Peter Hunt directs this film and how he edits those fights. I wish, just how Lazenby, I wish he would have had another film. I wish Peter Hunt would have had another film. Because I think the producers were kind of rough on the guy. They give him the keys to the car, and he makes something awesome that's going to stand the test of time and be revered as one of the best made Bond films. But because it wasn't a hit when it came to theaters, they're just like, yeah, we're done with you, buddy. I don't know. That's just me. If I had to axe to grind against Cubby Broccoli, that would be one of not give Peter Hunt another shot.
So you feel like that Lazenby deserved another shot as Bond?
Yeah. Unfortunately, he had a bad agent who told him that the Bond series was basically done and that he should go and do something else. And this was kind of his big shot. I didn't know he did some other stuff in Hong Kong. And like you said, he's done a bunch of B movies and probably straight to DVD movies. But things could have been different if this would have been a massive hit and George Lazenby wasn't a goofball. But
he can always say he did play James Bond, or at least he was in a Bond film.
And who knows, if you're like 23, 24,
right?
Who knows what you would do in those situations.
Exactly.
So I got to give him some slack.
Yeah.
But now we're getting into the creme de la creme.
The creme de la creme.
The best Bond films, period.
In our opinion, anyway.
And all of these I didn't go to somebody else's list and look at them and say, "Oh, I'm just going to copy theirs."
Yeah.
These were like the ones that I really thought about. I evaluated. I said these are my top 3.
Yeah.
So just know that.
Yeah.
Not that I have to say that. I'm just.
No, you're good.
There's no these top 3. They're just almost like duh.
They're
there's
iconic.
nothing to shake up here.
Yeah.
So at number 3, and this was actually number 2 for me
Mm-hmm.
until about a month ago.
Okay.
Because I rewatched the one that I have at number 2, but we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
So at number 3, the one we just podcasted pretty recently about, Goldfinger.
Yeah. This is my number 2, so I'm gonna stay up. So I'm gonna give you the floor on this, and you go ahead.
Okay, yeah, Goldfinger. I mean, like I said, we just podcast about it. It's the sort of Bond. It's the one that anybody could look up and say, "This
Yeah.
is a James Bond film right here." This Aston Martin thing that he's driving, this sort of like the cars that Bond drives, this swagger that he has, this art, this villain, all this stuff. It's so iconic.
This is so close to number 1 for me. It like Goldfinger. Gosh, man, I remember watching this film as a kid and just being like, how cool is James Bond? I mean, you know, when he goes in there and he's spying on Goldfinger, who is, you know, cheating at cards. Yeah, I mean, Sean Connery owns the role. We talked about somebody else playing the role. But yeah, this was Sean Connery's role for years, and a lot of people say this is James Bond, and for good reason.
Yeah.
For very, very good reason. And I think this movie is one of the best examples of, you know, what makes this character so great.
As we said when we were podcasting about this was one that I used to thought was overrated. That I thought it was just kind of like, you know, it's kind of not the best. I mean, you look at it on the surface, Guy Hamilton.
Yes.
He doesn't have the director chops that, let's say, Terrence Young or Lewis Gilbert or any of those guys have. But
I'm glad you wised up, my friend.
yeah, but yeah, I just wasn't getting it. I didn't understand the fun that this film is. That Bond showing up with the duck on his helmet right at the start. This so well made opening title sequence. The airplanes putting people to sleep. There's just so much randomness in this. I love it. A henchman who throws a hat to kill people.
Oddjob. Who was an actual convicted murderer. I mean, you know, this film has it all, my friend.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a very well made film. Lots of fun. It's number 3. We just podcasted recently, so I don't want to revisit all that stuff. If you want to hear that, what we said about it, that's there. But before we go on, I do have to agree with what you were saying about Connery in this one. This is James Bond. He's not acting. He's not playing the character. He just is Bond in this film.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this film probably rise even more for me.
Yeah. There's a scene towards the beginning of the film when he goes in the office for the first time and he does that, you know, and now for my next miracle. And he's just trying to be cool. And of course, M stuffs that out a little bit. Talk about M, the guy that played. Talk about Connery's Bond. This guy is M. I mean, all due respect to Judi Dench and her portrayal as M. To me, this is my favorite M. What do you think about this guy?
Yeah, I've always liked Bernard Lee the best.
Yeah, Bernard Lee is fantastic.
And he changes the character up a little bit as he ages.
He does. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he
loosens up.
We get him. Well, I would say he loosens up. I think he's just got different dynamics between Connery's Bond and Moore's Bond. I think the fact that Roger Moore is always interrupting him and correcting him in front of other people probably makes him not like him that much. He gets angry, but meanwhile, with Connery and Bernard Lee, I think it's more like just he's a boss. He's going to tell you what to do, order you around, be very frank about it, and then send you on the mission. That's the best part about him. He just gets us to the exciting stuff that's going to happen. But here we go, number 2.
Yeah.
This is the one that was trending down for me. Like at one point, I would have said this might be out of my top 10 now. It was always my favorite until like I don't know 5 years ago.
No.
But it was on the downswing until I rewatched it about a month ago.
And it came back up.
And yeah, it just blew me away. Had the best viewing experience since I was a kid with From Russia with Love. I think this one is the best written Bond film. I think it has amazing locations. Terrence Young actually directs a good film. I didn't know he was capable of that, but he does awesome, doing his best Alfred Hitchcock impression. This one's just so much fun, and it's the thing that appealed to me back in the day, and still does now, is this one tries to be a serious spy film. It's got some serious espionage. It's got some double crossing. And it works. It's really cool. I think a lot of times when the series tries that, it doesn't work for me. But From Russia with Love, man, it's a great film.
I think this is probably the best written Bond film. I feel like, it's the good story. I like Korean Bay. I mean, talk about that guy. I mean, like, as far as Bond characters that maybe people overlook or forget, or, we talked about M a minute ago, but this guy, I mean, he doesn't have to bring it as much as he does. And he brings it. I think he's a great ally for Bond.
Oh yeah, that guy's awesome. He's a great,
one of the best,
great actor. That's what makes it rise for me. And I haven't mentioned the allies too much during this whole conversation. In my top 5 here, I have 2 the best allies: Korean Bay, but also Tiger Tanaka from You Only Live Twice. Those guys are just great. They make those films even better. And he makes this film better. Istanbul, the location makes this film better.
Ooh,
I love that. I love the part where they go to the gypsy camp. It's just this is what they've lost. Is they've lost this sense of you're actually on this trip with this guy. You're getting to breathe in these locations, and we get that the whole time. Even on the train, I still feel that sense of adventure. I feel that we are in a different place, and I don't know. This film is just so well made.
How many films have a really good chess scene, man?
Yeah.
I mean,
a good chess scene.
And I'm not even a chess fan. I don't even know how to play chess. This, and he makes it interesting. Obviously, it doesn't last long, but it is shot so incredibly well. It's just, cannot say enough. I know I put this film lower. I was being kind of facetious when I did this, but I got in a kick with this film. I actually watched this film like not days in a row, but like weeks in a row. Like I'd watch it once a week for like a couple of weeks, just because I just love the flow of the film, the way the film is written, but also the way the film is shot. I mean, you talk about that chess scene and how you have the message under the cup of water. I mean, just how that all is presented.
Yeah. And that's going where you're saying how well written is, because that's supposed to be this character's thing. Is he's the planner, he's the chess master, and Bond is symbolic, I guess. Bond is the pawn for most of the film, but it turns out this guy is not a pawn. He is I don't know. He's not the king, but he's got a lot of powers as far as what he could do. And I guess if I had to knock it on anything. It's the 60s, the way they photograph some of the action toward the end, not the fight on the train. That's stellar. But the thing with the boat, that's the one scene that kind of made it go down for me a lot at one point. That and the helicopter scene. I love those as a kid because I'm like, explosion, it's crazy. But now I'm like, let's just get on to the good stuff, or maybe the best stuff's already happened, because the stuff on the train with Red Grant, that's amazing. Like, he is the best henchman, if you want to call him the henchman.
What's your thoughts on the opening title? I mean, not the opening title, but the pre-title sequence.
That's not my favorite.
I agree with you. Good. I'm glad.
I think it's one of those that works the first time you watch it.
It does.
Because I remember as a kid, like, well, crap, Bond's dead.
Bond's dead.
And then, no, that was.
They rip off the mask, and you're like, oh, okay. Never mind.
yeah, that's just one of the, it works the first time. Then after that, you're like, okay, yeah, we get it. Red Grant, he's a killer.
No.
This could be referenced later. This thing with the watch and the
No.
strangling. Yeah.
Talk about the villains, though, man. I mean, we got Goldfinger. We talked about him, and he's fantastic. But boy, they knock it out of the park in the villain department with this film.
Yeah, you got Rosa Klebb with her poison shoes.
Yeah.
You got Blofeld with his first on-screen appearance, but you don't even see him. You just see his cat and his hands petting the cat, and that's awesome. I remember like that build-up for him. I was just like, I wonder who he is. What is this guy? He's just, I know he's number one, and that's it. And then we have Red Grant, of course, like I was saying. Robert Shaw played this. I guess he's sort of like a James Bond gone bad or something like that.
I mean, we hadn't even talked about the opening song. You fan of the song from Wrestling Love?
I like the one at the end with the guy singing, but I don't like the orchestra sort of one they have for the title sequence.
Yeah. I get you.
The first three films, those title sequences, I just have to give them a pass because they didn't know what they were doing at that point. They weren't rotoscoping naked girls at that point. They were just let's get a projector and we're gonna project scenes from the movie on these girls. That's kind of what they did.
Pretty much. Yep.
And they really were playing up that belly dancer. They're like, people have never seen a belly dancer before. They're gonna go crazy for this.
I mean, I can't say I don't enjoy it, so.
Yeah,
but I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
And
I get it.
We'll come back to these 60s Bonds at some point because it seems like they're very ripe for discussion. But for number one for me, this is a build-up for it.
Number one.
Because I always liked this film, but it didn't blow me away until I finally saw it on Blu-ray and saw what Lewis Gilbert was going for with how this film is shot and how they're just basically telling the most epic Bond story ever. It's Roger Moore in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Ooh.
This one, in my opinion, nobody does it better. As the song implies, as it says. This is just the perfect Bond film, in my opinion.
Okay, my number one is Live and Let Die. I love the film. It's got the great villain. It's got the great song, locations. But let's go into your film first. Let's talk about this film. It's not a bad film. I will give you. It's not a bad film. I think it's got a good story. I think the villain's fairly strong. Where for me, I just don't think the story. We talk about the story. I think the story's a little weak compared to some of these others. Sell me on the story, man. What?
Okay, so on the surface, the story is your textbook James Bond adventure. It's possible World War III happening, end of the world stuff, but also this villain wants to create an underwater society. So it's got that craziness going for it. It's got that big scale. And that's why I love Lewis Gilbert films, because he goes for that big scale. He has those big battles at the end with basically armies fighting each other. You don't get that in every Bond film, and that's hard to pull off, in my opinion, to make those feel like we care about these people out here fighting, that we're invested in it.
Right.
But to me, what makes this one excel for me is from the story, like you're asking about, it has this one plot that people forget about. And that's the titular Spy Who Loved Me. That's Agent Triple X. She finds out toward the end of the film that Bond killed her boyfriend. That he did that on a mission. We saw it in the pre-title sequence. We didn't know how significant that was. And she finds this out. And this adds a personal stake to it. But it's also, you got to think about the Cold War. This is a Russian agent and an English agent going on a mission together to save the world. I don't know. It didn't work for me always, but the spectacle and just how it's presented, it floors me every time. This one is just so well crafted.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like I said, I get the attraction to it. I think the performances are great. I don't think there's a real bad performance. The villain in here is not my favorite. I'm not a huge fan of this villain, but the song is good. So
Yeah, I mean the villain is not the best, but the
Yeah.
henchman makes up for it. We get
Yeah.
Jaws, and Jaws, he's my favorite henchman just because the way he gets presented at the beginning, he's like a slasher villain. Like
Yeah.
this guy's scary.
yeah,
Actually, and you're like, crap, what? Bond can't even hurt this guy, and it's really good in this one. It gets a little silly with Moonraker,
yeah,
but I don't know. I really like Jaws. This action, you don't think about Roger Moore being good in an action sequence too much, but the way they kind of directed around him
Yeah.
and made him look awesome, he works in this one. Especially the car chase, man. There's a car chase scene with the helicopter.
Yeah.
Man, it's so good. I'm moving
Yeah.
around so much. I'm thinking about this movie and how excited I am.
Hey man, I get you. We've already talked about Live and Let Die, so I'm not gonna repeat myself. But I think this film has the best pre-title sequence. I love the whole, agents dying in 3 different areas and the way they do. I think this film has the best song, Wings. Paul McCartney's Wings, Live and Let Die, and the ending. I think the ending. Get back to the ending with it on the train. I think this film is just a fantastic film. It's a lot of fun. I love Roger Moore. I think this is Roger Moore's best outing.
Talked about like rethinking our list a little bit after
Yeah.
discussing, and this would be the one that I would sub in for You Only Live Twice as my
Okay.
number 5. It is
Okay.
my top 5.
Yeah.
I love this film. So much fun. I don't think it's best
Okay.
Roger performance though. I think The Spy Who Loved Me. I think at that point
Yeah.
he owns it. He's just so cool, so funny,
Yeah.
but he's also ruthless, which we need. We need that harder edge. He's all that stuff. And to me, I like this film, like I've been saying, how it's made. This opening, you were saying you like that pre-title
Yeah.
sequence from Live and Let Die. I put it up against
Ooh.
this pre-title sequence. This is the
Okay.
best pre-title sequence. That downhill chase on the skis
Yeah.
and using his pole as the gun and all that stuff. The Union Jack parachutes.
Yeah.
How it segues from that to the titles is the best. Period.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope you give this one a shot again.
Oh
and
yeah,
see
yeah.
its majesty.
You're
'Cause
you're selling me on it for sure.
it's definitely one that if you enjoy like the filmmaking aspects like
Yeah.
I do, I think you'll enjoy it more than you did as a kid probably. But
I think that what we're doing is we're really proving that this is the best series of movies because you have all of these different choices to say, no, this is the best title sequence. This is the best, song or whatever. And also, you're talking about, reordering your list and, you could just think about your list now and be like, yeah, I might change it up a little bit. Especially if you're lifelong fans of the series like we are. I mean, this is just, whether you put Moonraker #1 or Live and Let Die or GoldenEye, I don't think you're going to make a wrong choice. I think that's the point we're trying to make here is these James Bond films are all fun. They all have a lot going for them in the sense of adventure and, a good villain, obviously a good Bond girl. So it's really hard. I mean, sure, some do better than others, but it's really hard to mess up, the Bond formula, as we talked about, through these videos.
I agree with that mostly. There was a few that we were pretty hard on. A
We
few
were.
that we were
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I probably not gonna watch this one too much, but we see the appeal, and that's
Yeah.
the thing is like
Exactly.
the camp of these Lewis Gilbert ones that I'm talking about,
Yep.
or even the camp of Live and Let Die,
Yep,
might not work for everybody.
exactly.
But for me, I'm all about that. I will take that over that brooding, serious Craig stuff any day.
Yeah.
It's just a different type of coffee, different drink, soda, whatever you want to call it. I like it all, but this was a lot of fun talking about Bonds. ranking
Was.
these, and we'll probably come back to Bond a little bit later.
Oh, I'm sure
because
we will. Yeah.
just from this discussions that we've had, there's been 3 or 4 that were like, "Oh man, that'd be a great episode." Just getting that podcast hat on, thinking about that, it's exciting.
Stay tuned for that, guys. What do you guys think? Give us your list if you have it yet. What is your Bond list? This is a lot harder than you think. I mean, like we said, 25 films over 60 years. There's probably going to be more. I hope there's more. Do you feel? Are you still hungry for Bond? Do you feel like they can still tell more good stories? I mean, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I think they should do it. I don't know how they should best do it. It depends on how it goes. I mean, we were talking about, I think you brought up Marvel or something at the beginning. Yeah, people get fatigued. People get tired of that stuff.
True.
We never thought that would kind of wane in public interest.
Right.
And now people are coming against it. But we'll see. I think they just got to make good films. I think that's the important thing. Just make good films. People continue watching them.
Right on, brother. I couldn't have said it better myself. And keep watching our videos, guys. We still got some stuff in the works. Still going to work on some things to hopefully bring you guys. Give us a thumbs up on this video. Share it with your friends. Let us know what you think. Give us your Bond list. We will see you guys next time on the SuperCaZt. Take care, everybody.